A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor, presented by Shannon Lassiter and Keith Worthington, Part 2. In addition to foreshadowing, O'Connor uses symbolism extensively. Here are a few examples. John Wesley, the name of the young boy. John Wesley was the founder of the Methodist Church. Methodism is a Protestant faith that rejected the sacraments and general rules and formality of the Catholic faith. O'Connor, a devout Catholic, presents John Wesley in this story as an unruly and obnoxious brat. A not so subtle comment about the Methodist religion. Hats. The misfit wears a black hat, so he's the bad guy in the black hat. Another hat that O'Connor uses as a symbol is the hat worn by the grandmother. The grandmother wears an ornate flowered hat that at the start of their journey is in pristine condition, but it falls to pieces as her fate unfolds. After the accident, she still has the hat on her head, but the brim is broken and the flowers are falling off to the side. I think some of the more meaningful uses of symbolism would be in the characters, the misfit and the grandmother. Okay. The misfit represents a science-oriented modern world that's kind of searching but unable to find Christ. It needs to know how things work as science, and it's unable to accept the grace of faith. The misfit is morally bankrupt, and he has no pleasure but meanness. The grandmother, on the other hand, represents the past, steeped in moral tradition. It's faith-based, but unable to reconcile with the modern world. Her appeal to faith, her calls to Jesus in this story, are fruitless and unable to save her. We said earlier that, on second reading, we started to see the story as being more clever, witty, and humorous. I wanted to go back to where we talked about the foreshadowing. So on the second reading, kind of once you know what's going to happen, like I said, those foreshadowing events become dramatic irony, and they're rather funny. So I gave you the two examples kind of early in the presentation. Here's another one on page 1348. This is Bailey kind of after, he's had the accident. This is what he says. "Listen," Bailey began, "we're in a terrible predicament. Nobody realizes what this is." And his voice cracked. I just kind of found that humorous. And there's probably instances like that on almost every page multiple times. Another kind of example of her kind of humor. The grandmother's favorite song was the Tennessee Waltz. Well, that's a kind of classic country song about introducing your best friend to your sweetheart and having your best friend take your sweetheart away. So it's sort of kind of symbolic in a way of how she brings Bailey Boy to the misfit. So as Bailey's driving the car, so he sits with his jaw rigid as a horseshoe. Well, of course, the horseshoe is a symbol of good luck, right? And on Red Sammy's advertisement, or the Tower Restaurant's advertisement, one of the lines there is, None like famous red Sammies. Like, no one likes famous red Sammies. Though what the advertisement was meant to say was nothing like famous red Sammies. So, and then the EAT story. So, with the watermelon, that just kind of hilarious. So, those are just some examples, and I'd encourage you to reread the story a second time because it really is quite fun. Themes in the story: appearances and false impressions. The grandmother calls Red Sammy a good man, probably because he is nostalgic about the past, but he's anything but a good man. As he utters the words, "You don't know who you can trust," he's wiping his face with a gray handkerchief. A gray handkerchief is used to let others know that you actually practice sexual bondage. He also has a organ grinder monkey. An organ grinder monkey is only used to collect money from people. And his wife blatantly tells him that you can't trust anyone, and she says that as she's looking directly at her husband, Sammy. Racism. There's the EAT story and the Pickaninny story. I don't believe O'Connor is really meaning to comment on racism. She's just using those stories to illustrate that the grandmother is a racist. Religion, the misfit and the grandmother are both searching for Christ, a little bit uniquely, but I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. The last theme is the cultural change in society. The misfit is polite but immoral. He's devoid of faith. And he's only able to reconcile the world by what he can see concretely or through science. The grandmother, on the other hand, can accept the world only through tradition and faith. Yet she's a hypocrite, lacking in moral character as well. It is relevant that the misfit kills it. The good man in the story. So the title of the story, "A Good Man is Hard to Find," is spoken by the character Sammy Butts, who we've already discussed is untrustworthy, disreputable, probably the least trustworthy character in the whole story. It's somewhat of a mystery as to why O'Connor would choose that character to speak the title of the story. But nevertheless, the story is appropriate because the two central characters, the misfit and the grandmother, are both passionately searching for the good man. And the good man in the story is Jesus Christ. The misfit searches passionately for him, but he cannot reconcile his existence because he has no faith. And he cannot believe what he could not actually see. In his own words, he said if he had been around in the time of Christ where he could have actually seen Jesus Christ, meaning if he were able to believe, if I would have known, I wouldn't be like I am now. The grandmother, she's also searching for Jesus Christ. But for her, she is she's calling on him to actually save her. She repeatedly tries to invoke him in an interaction with the misfit to intervene, to convince the misfit that he shouldn't harm her. But as we all know, that was all to no avail. It's both the misfit's experience with Jesus Christ and the grandmother's experience with him are extremely powerful comments on religion and faith. But as we said earlier, this is a postmodernist work, and to us, those two issues do not seem reconciled. They sort of stand on their own as sort of open questions. They're powerful statements, powerful questions, but they don't seem to be completely answered. In closing this presentation, we're going to leave you with a quote from Miss O'Connor herself, which sort of helps understand a little bit about how she wrote the story in the way she did, and maybe help us understand a little bit about what she was trying to do. And this is a quote from Flannery O'Connor, 1963. I think maybe that's a year before her death. Anyway, in my own stories, I have found that violence is strangely capable of returning my characters to reality and preparing them to accept their moment of grace. Their heads are so hard that almost nothing else will work. Thank you. Some clarification on the discussion questions for this unit. First question, why does the misfit keep touching the ground? He does this 3 or 4 times, with his gun, with his boot and stuff. And so we wanted to see what the class thought about the significance of that. Second question, every minor detail event name used in the story is placed there with intent and purpose, and nothing is used randomly or to take up space. If you disagree with this statement, please offer an example. Seems as though every detail, when we looked into it, the harder we looked into it, we eventually found some kind of meaning and relevance. So just curious, what the rest of the class found or thought. The third question, considering June as a child, why do none of the women in the story have names? They don't. As I think I've said before, I don't think O'Connor did anything without intention. So we wanted to see what the class thought that might be about. Was the grandmother good? Did she find grace in the story? The misfit says something. What did he say? He said, she would have been a good woman if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life. And so she was shot. So did she find her grace at the end of the story? And lastly, what does Connors say about the role of religion in shaping the cultural changes currently taking place in society? Thank you all for bearing with us through this presentation.